Welcome to Retirement GPS, navigated by Zynergy, your roadmap to a secure and confident retirement. Each week, we explore strategies, stories, and planning frameworks designed to help you navigate the complexities of life after work. From tax planning to investments, income strategies to risk management, our goal is to give you the clarity and confidence you need to make informed decisions. But retirement isn't just about the numbers. It's also about lifestyle, purpose, and peace of mind. We're here to guide you through both the financial details and the personal dimensions of this next chapter. Let's chart today's course.
Welcome back to the Retirement GPS podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Zaharchek, certified financial planner and president of Zynergy Retirement Planning.
And I'm your co-host, Zane Belsack, associate planner here at Zynergy.
What we're going to talk about today are legacy decisions, what to consider before leaving your children $5 million. Now, we actually picked a specific dollar amount because we feel like it ties really closely to dollar amounts that people are concerned about leaving to their children. Much smaller dollar amounts may not be as much of a concern. Much larger dollar amounts have different concerns. But specifically, this $4 to $6 million range is where concerns come in because many families that are approaching significant wealth transfer decisions, they balk. They balk at these decisions, not because they don't know what to do or how to do it. It's simply because they just don't want to make a mistake and leave too much to the children that are not ready to handle it.
This is where it really seems to turn from more of an emotional decision rather than a financial decision, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to your children, there's not really nothing more emotional than that. And of course, second to your children is probably your money. So we've got two very emotional decisions, two very emotional components tied together. And we want to talk a little bit about how we want to think about this. We want to reframe the question. We don't want to ask the question, how do I leave $5 million? But instead, what impact do I want this money to have? We're talking about, at $5 million, we're talking about generational money. This is money that will last, if handled properly, generation after generation. In fact, it could last hundreds of years if it's handled properly. And if it's not, as Zane will discuss with you a little bit later down the road, it can go very quick. So we just want to make sure that we create opportunity for our children and not dependency. Planning really should be intentional in how we do things, not reactive. We want to be proactive. We want to make sure that we've spoken with our family, that we put the right ducks in a row to make sure that our government's not getting as much money as they may if we don't do the proper planning. So being proactive is going to be really important. So let's start with our behavioral considerations. We'll get to the technical side. We're going to get to taxes. We're going to get to probate. We're going to get to estate planning and documentation. But let's start really with the behavioral side because the biggest risk is often behavioral. You could put the perfect financial plan in place and minimize taxes to almost zero and leave every dollar in the exact right way to your children. But if it's gone within 10 years because your children are frivolous in how they handle that money, frankly, I don't know about you, Zane, but I wouldn't see that as a success at my legacy planning.
That's not legacy at all. That's losing your money.
Yeah, that's a quick way downhill. And probably doing no favors for your children, right? Because you're leaving your children this sort of freedom windfall that leaves them in a place where they're not a productive member of society. They're not doing the things that you want your children to do long term. And ultimately, you're just setting themselves up for a very large fall when that money does run out. So often the biggest risk here is behavioral. It's not financial. What we potentially could do here by leaving our children so much money and not preparing them for it is a loss of motivation, right? Lifestyle inflation. Of course, there's going to be some lifestyle inflation. If you have two children and they each get $2.5 million at your death, I would hope there's going to be some lifestyle inflation. The question is it properly managed? And then, of course, poor financial decisions leading to quickly burning through that money. So it's important that we prepare our heirs for this money. We don't just fund their lifestyle. I love Warren Buffett's expression here, and he talks about this a lot, and especially with his own children. Obviously, Warren Buffett is one of the richest men in the world, and he's leaving money to his children, but he's also leaving a significant portion to charity. He has pretty strong opinions on this, and his opinion is, I want to leave my children. And by the way, Warren Buffett's in his 90s, so his children are in their 60s, so it's interesting to think about leaving 60-year-old children money and more eager to spoil them. But
Yeah, I would think your lifestyle is relatively established at that point.
I would imagine that, if they're anything like Warren, he's a pretty modest guy, so I can't imagine they're going to spend a whole ton here. But he has this philosophy that he coined, which is, I want to leave my children enough money that they can do something, but not so much that they can do nothing. And I have to be honest with you, I think that's one of the best phrases when it comes to legacy planning that we could think about. So we just want to make sure that they're prepared and that sloth and excess is not funded for the rest of their life. Family dynamics and communication are an important component here. Wealth transfer affects relationships between children, like it or not. If you cut one child out of a will and leave the other two children all of the money, that is going to affect their relationship. Do not be naive to that. So communication about that is really important when it comes to equality and fairness. And it may be absolutely fair that you cut a child out. You may say to that child that, listen, we've been supporting you while we're living for a long time and we never supported the other children. They're getting the inheritance. That may be totally fair. It may be totally equal. However, without communicating it in advance, it may not be a situation that is very palatable to that child, and they may not understand it. Truthfully, they may not understand why they got cut out. They may think that they were a black sheep or the other two were the favorites. So having that conversation is really important. If you don't have those proper communications, it creates confusion, it creates conflict. And I have heard for far less siblings just never speak to each other again. And again, Zane, going back to what we talked about earlier, is that the legacy that we want to leave, right?
Exactly. And that confusion really amongst especially siblings leads me into a question. What's the right way to even talk to your children about this? Is it through a financial planner? Is it through an attorney? What do you suggest? Is there one good way to do this?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And the truth is, there really is no one good way. It really depends on what's the right way for you. Simply sitting your children down and having a very honest and open dialogue at your house in your living room is one simple way to do it. And let them know this is what we're doing and this is why. We are trying to be as fair as possible, and here's what we see as fair. Now, you might get arguments, you might get debates, you might get feedback that you don't like, but at least you're communicating it during your lifestyle, and those discussions can be had. So when the time comes, people aren't surprised. And a lot of times that's where the problems come in. If you're not comfortable with that because you have children that have anger issues or situations that you're not comfortable with, certainly set up some time at the office of a local professional that you trust, that you work with. That could be an attorney, it could be a financial planner, and say, we want to have a discussion about legacy. We'd like our planner involved, and we'd like you to be there, and so that you understand exactly how things are going to flow. Because for us, communication is our most important component here, and making sure that we get that in place.
I guess some kind of mediator is really what I was looking for. I know it's not easy to have these conversations at all. And really, you mentioned legacy, and I wanted to dive into a little bit of a quote, really, the importance of explaining the intent behind these decisions that we make. And this is a quote from 2023. It's relatively old, but it's based on a 20-year study. And this 20-year study it was of 3,200 families by the Williams Group. And essentially, in this study, 70% of wealthy families lose their fortune by the second generation, and 90% lose it by the third. It's this third generational curse that's primarily caused by really just poor family dynamics, which we've talked about, the lack of communication and inadequate preparation of heirs, rather than market issues. It's not even the stock market plummeted and I lost all my money. It's my children didn't know how to spend the assets that I gave them, and it's a huge problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the issues here, and I've seen the statistic, and it is true, I've actually seen it in practice as well. By the third generation, you can expect your legacy to be gone if you do not set things up properly as far as communication and what to expect. And the big reason here, which is often overlooked and a little outside the topic of what we're talking about today, is because businesses transfer. Businesses tend to be the reason why we transfer large assets, is because we have a business interest that is significant. And when we transfer a business interest, the next generation is not prepared to handle that business and run that business and operate that business, which is why that money can go very quickly. And of course, they're doing a poor job operating a business, and they're also spending probably more aggressively than they should be. The two coupled together lead to bankruptcy, lack of money, lack of legacy. These are the conversations that we want to have. Now, there's things that we can put in place to control this, and those would be trusts. So trust structures and controls to make sure that we do have some control after the fact, after we pass away, to say we don't want our children to get $3 million and go out and be able to do whatever they want with it. whenever they want, especially if they're young and they probably haven't established themselves financially. They're just not ready to receive this big lump sum of money. I think we can all agree that we learn about money over time and through the use of money. I can tell you right now, my 6-year-old is not very good with money. But as those children grow and they have their own money, they earn their own money and they realize how much time it actually takes to earn $1 or a significant amount of money. They certainly are less willing to take it to the casino and gamble with it. Most people I know that work really hard for their money hate the casino and don't want to gamble. And most people I know that inherited a lot of money are more than willing to gamble it. Why? Because it came easy, right? Easy come, easy go. But if you're not comfortable just giving them that lump sum of money, we can put some controls in place. And a trust is a great way to put a control in place so that it controls how and when the money is distributed. And we work with people all the time to help them set up trusts for even adult children that they don't feel ready or comfortable to handle money, even if they feel like they are. They just don't want the child to have access to the money until the full principal, until they're maybe 40 or 50 or even 60 years old. So they can set up a situation where they can take 5% of the principal for the next 10, 20, 30 years, whatever it is you decide. That's the great thing about a trust. You can set it up any way you want. And then you go back to Warren Buffett's quote, which is, I want to give them enough to do something, but not so much they can do nothing. You think about 5% of $2 million, you're collecting $100,000 a year to do nothing, effectively. Now, could you live off $100,000 a year? Sure, depending on where you're listening to this, you could easily do that. If you're in the Northeast, in New Jersey, New York City area, you could, but it would be a little bit challenging. So that may not be enough to immobilize you and say, I'm just going to sit back and do nothing and collect my trust inheritance. So you're going to want to go out and do something. And maybe you'll use that money to start a business or start a foundation and really do something productive in society. And that's really, I expect, the goal of what a lot of people are trying to accomplish. So it also, a trust can protect the assets against creditors, divorce, and poor decisions. When we talk about divorce is another major concern for individuals when you have a married couple. If the assets are handled properly, which again should be communicated, inherited assets are actually not included as part of divorce in most states. So here in New Jersey, if I inherit assets and I keep them separate in a separate account, in my name only, they're not commingled. If I get divorced 5 years later, those assets go to me. They are not divided up. But most people don't know that and don't do it properly. A trust can help with that for sure. Making sure that we get the right trustee in place that can handle the distribution and handling how we want that distribution to work. Because we may say we only want our child to get 5% of the principal each year, but what if they get cancer and they have treatments that cost $150,000 a year, or there's an emergency when it comes to their child, or they have a child that wants to go to college? Are they allowed to touch the principal? And the answer is typically yes. If it is for the health and education and well-being of the individual, a trustee usually has the ability to distribute more assets, which is, I assume, what we want, right? We want them to have money if they have a health crisis for their education. So we want to balance this flexibility with protection, but a trust can be a great way to help here.
Now, I'm really interested, and there's no good way of asking this, but I want to talk to you about taxes. And I know something to consider. It might not be as much of an issue now as it might be later as your assets grow, but the estate tax thresholds, which I believe right now is $15 million for a single individual and then $30 million for a married couple. I also know that there's a difference between, and this might be out of the scope of this conversation, but the step-up basis when you gift assets to someone versus when you die and the person inherits it. Isn't there a step-up basis with assets as well? How does all these taxes work together? And is there a problem that we should really be looking into when all these assets come into your possession at once?
Yeah, and it's a great question because taxes for estate planning generally are pretty well managed. Like you mentioned, the federal exemption is $30 million for a married couple, $15 million for an individual. Not that eliminates everybody, but most of the people that we work with are below that amount. So we don't have to worry about a federal estate tax. But there are a lot of hidden taxes, I should say, that people don't tend to think about when it comes to their estate. The first one is the state taxes. So the state that you live in, the individual state itself may have taxes. They may have an estate tax and they may have a death tax. An estate tax is a tax to the estate itself, and a death tax is a tax to the beneficiary. So you need to look at your state and what those estate taxes are and those inheritance taxes, which would be a death tax as an example. In New Jersey, we don't have one. So for us, it's actually relatively nice. There is a tax on the type of beneficiary that is inherited. So There is actually an inheritance tax and death tax on what's called Class B beneficiaries in New Jersey. Class A beneficiaries are things like your children, your grandchildren, your spouse. Clearly, they fall under Class A, the people you typically leave the money to. Class B beneficiaries would be things like nieces and nephews, siblings. They would fall under a different category and would have a different tax associated with them. But I'm going to use New York State since it's our neighbor. They do have an exemption that's not unlimited. And New York has a $7,350,000 per person exemption in 2026. That's $14,700,000 for a married couple. So pretty high exemption. But if you're over that, you may not have a federal estate tax, but you may have a New York estate tax. So we need to think about that. Now, you mentioned stepped up basis, which is a great question. A lot of people will start gifting assets during their life, and we'll get to gifting in a moment. But really, I want to talk about the stepped up basis because a lot of people make a huge mistake by gifting assets during their lifetime that they really shouldn't be yet gifting. A great example is your home, your house, especially for older generation. They've been living in their house for 40, 50, 60 years, never moved out, bought the house for $30,000 in 1965, and now the house is worth $750,000. So huge capital gain. If they don't sell that house during their lifetime, they don't trigger that capital gain, right? Because we only trigger a capital gain when we sell the house. However, if we gift it to our children so they own it, and then we retain a life ownership, which means we can live in the house as long as we are alive, which is what a lot of people want to do, a lot of lawyers recommend. The problem there is you're now gifting, and when that house is sold, that basis remains that very low basis back from the 60s. So when you die and your children sell your house, they're going to pay a massive capital gains tax on that, probably to the tune of $100,000, simply because you gifted it during your lifetime. If you leave it to them in your will when you pass, guess what? Now you get a stepped up basis. So what that means is the value of the house, the basis of the house steps up to when you pass away. So if you bought it for $35,000, it's worth $750 when you pass away. When your children sell it, if they sell it for $750 within 2 months of you passing away, they pay zero tax. So it's a really important thing to understand when we talk about stepped up basis for taxable investments, specifically a house, specifically assets that you've owned for a long time that have grown in value. Probably not a great idea to gift those assets unless we're gifting it to a charity. Okay?
That's a lifesaver. That sounds like a huge lifesaver.
Huge lifesaver. I've seen the mistake many times. People come to us and they say, what do you mean I got to pay tax on it? My mom gifted it during our lifetime, and by the time I explain it, they pretty much are at a loss. That they just
too late.
$70,000 tax bill that could have been avoided. And then the last thing we want to talk about is leaving retirement accounts to your heirs and the tax liability there. Now, again, there's no estate tax on it, but if you have pre-tax retirement accounts, meaning I put the money in pre-tax, I'm going to have an income tax liability on that retirement account, whether I take it during my lifetime or whether my children or my heirs take it during their lifetime. Now, the problem is they changed the law a few years ago, and the Secure Act that was changed probably about 5 years ago now adjusted that you cannot stretch that over your lifetime. It used to be you take required minimum distributions and stretch out those distributions over your lifetime, spreading out the tax liability. No, says Congress, you now have to take it over a 10-year period. So an IRA has to come out over the 10 years following the death of the original IRA owner. Now, that can be a problem, especially if we're talking with leaving $1 million IRA or a $2 million IRA to someone who's already earning a pretty decent living. They have to take $100,000, $200,000 a year. And you might say, oh, boo-hoo, poor kid, poor problem. And you're right. These are good problems to have for sure. But there is no question then you're going to be pushing them potentially into the highest tax brackets during those 10 years. And a lot of that money right now, anywhere from 33, 37 to even in the mid 40%, depending on the state that you live in, is going to go out in income taxes. If you live in California and you're in the highest bracket, almost 50% of that money is going to taxes. We want to make sure that we understand that. And if we're leaving pre-tax IRAs to high earners, that we think about strategies to avoid that. Also, if we're leaving pre-tax IRAs to trusts that are going to be ultimately distributed to our children or our heirs, just remember, trusts have much higher income tax rates than individuals. Anything over $11,700 in income in a trust will be taxed at 35%, and anything over $16,000 in income in the trust will be taxed at 37% in 2026. We've got massive tax rates at very low numbers. So be careful when doing these income strategies. The solution here, which we talk about a lot in our office, is one of our best tax strategies, is a Roth conversion. By converting during our lifetime, even in modest tax brackets, we're converting through the 24% bracket every year that we can. Why? For this reason. Because if we don't do it, the money will come out, and it'll most likely come out at higher tax rates by our heirs if we're not doing it today. Uncle Sam's going to get his cut. The question is, how much cut do we want to allow him to get?
But if your kids had an inherited Roth IRA, they would take it out and the money's already paid for in tax, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. If it's an inherited Roth IRA, they have to take it out over the same 10-year period. That's not great, but the great thing is zero tax. Then they're getting the $200,000 a year tax-free, which is fantastic. Not too shabby. So we're coming to the end here. Just a couple things to think about. Lifetime versus inheritance planning. Just remember that you can gift up to $19,000 per year per person. So if you're a married couple, gifting to a married couple, you can give $38,000 and your spouse can give $38,000. That is a lot of money to get passed off during your lifetime if you're worried about these inheritance taxes and certainly being over thresholds. And it also can help build responsibility and help your child or your grandchildren start to learn some financial responsibility while you're young. And best of all, you get to enjoy watching them utilize it, enjoy it during your lifetime as opposed to leaving it all when you pass. Just remember, don't gift a highly appreciated asset in that range. Why? Because of the stepped up basis, which we talked about. All right. So if we're going to look back and reflect on what we want to accomplish and what's important today, it's number one, make sure that you're sitting down and communicating. What is important to you? What are the things that we want to accomplish? And making sure that your children are on the same page. All right. Making sure your heirs are on the same page where you can. Second is developing a plan and speaking with professionals. So that could be your estate planning attorney. That can be your financial planner. You don't have to have the tools. That's not your job. And I get frustrated with people because they don't even communicate their goals because they don't know they can be done. And we always say to our people when we're doing an estate plan, especially a complicated plan, if there were no taxes, rules, boundaries, guidelines, exactly what would you want to have happen? How would you love things to work so that it's your ideal estate planning scenario? And when they talk that out, a lot of times we can get them 90% of the way there. Most people say zero taxes, and oftentimes we can get them there at zero taxes. But we want to know how you want things to flow. And once you put it in real language, then we can make it official. So make sure that you get that communicated, get those goals out, and then work with a professional to get it documented, get it in place. Once you've got everything communicated, everything in place, your goals set, now just make sure that you're combining lifetime gifting with your estate planning the way you want to.
Now, the underlying theme is most mistakes come from either not planning at all or really just simple planning. And I would give a rule of thumb over the podcast, but it's really tough to do that for anything financial. So it's really important to keep in mind your own situation. Are your children really prepared to handle this level of wealth? Would the money itself create an opportunity or a risk? And have you clearly communicated your intentions, as Ryan was mentioning? These are all really important to consider when having this meeting.
And I think the ultimate goal here is we want to leave our children in a better position, our family in a better position, while reducing what goes to the government, right? So make sure they're prepared to be in a better position. And that's what we're talking about today. So if you think about structuring a meaningful wealth transfer plan, this is the type of planning that we help families navigate every day. Come on in, give us a call. If you like what you heard today, make sure that you hit the like button on our podcast. We really appreciate it. Leave a comment. We hope you do, because honestly, it helps other people find us who may be having the same problems that you have. And anything else, Zane? I think we got it all.
No, that's it. Make sure to follow us too.
Follow us on Facebook, follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram. Make sure that you're getting updated content weekly when it comes out. And in the meantime, keep learning, keep planning.
Thank you for listening to Retirement GPS, navigated by Zenergy. To explore today's topic further, visit our blog mile markers at zenergyretirement.com/blog, where we offer detailed strategies, examples, and downloadable tools to support your retirement journey. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook at Zenergy Retirement Planning for weekly insights, checklists, and planning reminders. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share it with someone planning for their future. Until next time, keep navigating toward a confident retirement. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as investment, legal, or tax advice. Listeners should consult their own financial, tax, and legal advisors before making any decisions. Zane Retirement Planning is a registered investment advisor located in Red Bank, New Jersey.